It's such a pleasure to see so many of you here tonight after last year's slightly smaller and more bijou audience, thanks to a train strike. So it's great to see so many of you here this evening. We have had a great year in the WCIT charity. You may have seen our review, our annual report for 2022 that was sent round to members recently. Just a couple of highlights from last year. We had 240 applications for funding last year, which is way beyond our capacity. If we were to fulfil all the requests that we had last year, it would have we would have had to have made £2.4 million in grants. We aspire to making £2.4 million in grants, and it's the long-term vision of the charity. By 2032 we will be in the top 12 grant-making charities amongst delivery companies. We've got a long way to go to achieve that. We're currently around about 20th in the league table that's been put together for us, so we've still got a way to go. Because some of the charities at the top end of the tree, as you can imagine, have been doing it for a few hundred years longer than we have. Where's Brian? Our Mercer trustee over there. That said, we did last year make grants of £140,000, which is a tremendous result, a tremendous achievement, and thank you to the members of the WCIT for your generosity in enabling us to do that. Of the grants that we made, over half of them were supported by members of the WCIT, and a rough estimate tells us that around 280,000 people across the UK will have benefited directly from the grants that we made last year. So in terms of value for money and impact of your donations, we're doing a fantastic job. The main part of this evening is devoted to our friends, our partners from Thames Reach, and I'm pleased to welcome Bill, Rosie, Alessi and Rob from Thames Reach, who are going to tell us a bit more about what's been going on over the last, I think it's 8 years that we've been working together. So with that said, thank you. I'll hand over to Bill and the crew from Thames Reach. Thank you.
Thank you. So, thank you for having us, and also thank you very much for your support over the last 8 years. And I'm going to say a little bit. So, first of all, I should introduce myself. I'm Bill Tidnam. I'm the Chief Executive of Thames Reach. You'll hear later from the people who do the work. But I just want to say a little bit about Thames Reach and what we do, to give that a context to sit within. So, as an organisation, we work with people affected by rough sleeping in London. That doesn't mean we do the dramatic stuff, so we do go out and find people on the streets and get people off the streets, get people into accommodation and help people move on with their lives and move away from homelessness. And we do the stuff around stopping that happening. That's very difficult at the moment, as times, as I'm sure you'll all know, are very tight, particularly if you're on a low income. But that's really important work. We far prefer to be doing a lot more of that and a lot less of the dramatic stuff of finding people on the streets and talking to people on the streets. And I think sometimes it can be a stretch to see where what we call digital literacy, what we do here, as how that's connected with the sort of really visceral work of helping people who are sleeping out, have no bed to go to. But it's really integral. So what we want to do as an organisation is work with people for as little as possible. We want people to help people help themselves and get on with their lives. And since I've been working in this field, which is a very long time, literacy has become more important, and digital literacy has sort of moved on after that, because actually you can't run your own life without having access to hardware, but also to resources, and also the wherewithal to use them. And I think, so I'm going to hand over to Alessi now. So I should be giving you more warning there. But I'm going to hand over to Alessi very shortly to talk about the work that we're doing, how that's really, really central to the work that we do in helping people move away from homelessness and have a life outside homelessness. So, over to you.
Thank you, Bill. Hello everyone, my name's Alessi Beaver. I am the Essential Skills Manager at Thames Reach. I've been in post about a year, but I've been with the organisation about 7 years. And I just wanted to reaffirm to everyone how reassuring it is to have had a service like iReach at Thames Reach, because you knew there was somewhere that you could refer people to where they were going to get relationship-based support that was holistic, that addressed matters that were important to them at their own pace. So a big thank you for the 8 years of support that you've given us. Me and Rob are going to reflect back on some of the achievements and what that has meant for us as an organisation and where we are now because of the work that we have done with WCIT. You may all have seen this in the most recent report, but it's probably worth reflecting back on again. So a significant number of people have been supported with this grant, so 4,500 people accessing iReach support through 1,200 sessions and 1,800 key digital skills achieved. And what we mean by key digital skills, we're talking about foundational skills that people need to participate meaningfully in everyday life. And that covers a wide variety of areas. But these ones I think are particularly key. So applying for and securing work, managing your money through online banking, quite a lot of resistance to online banking, but we know that it saves people a lot of time once they've got it and know how to use it. Accessing learning, both in-person and remote learning, and people progressing on to accredited training with colleges. And that's what we want to do. We want people to be confident enough so that they can progress on to mainstream provision. During this period of time, 2014 to 2022, we saw the digitalisation of welfare benefits with the rollout of universal credit. So ensuring that people had access to devices and had the skills to manage their benefit claim was really central to keeping people in accommodation. Supporting people to communicate with loved ones, very important obviously given recent times during the pandemic, being able to sort of reach people remotely, and similarly transacting online, saving people time and money, and something that I think we all found very useful during the pandemic to kind of get our basic needs met. We support people around accessibility, and Rob probably will talk a tiny bit more about that. As an organisation, we support people with many different learning differences, so we see technology as kind of a tool that we can put in people's hands so that they can understand the world around them a bit better. And finally, security, so supporting people with strategies to kind of keep their information safe when they go online. And what we often see is that kind of fear is the thing that's getting in the way of people going online. We talk to them about the positive things they could do on the internet, but actually it's the fear that's the barrier. So lots of support around that. And in terms of what that means for the people we support, we see enormous increases in confidence, and that is kind of our model. It's relationship based, it's about building trust, it's about doing things in safe environments, doing things with people at their pace. And off the back of that, we then see that people have the tools and the knowledge and the confidence to problem solve themselves, and also to advocate around matters that are really important to them. And that's what we need people to get to that point for them to be independent. And finally, recovery, and again I think Rob will touch on this as well. Recovery obviously in the conventional sense around health, so people being able to liaise with doctors, be able to keep appointments, that's massively important, and digital technologies can support with that. But also recovery from homelessness, so being able to apply for work, accessing your benefits, that's a big part of the step of people exiting homelessness. Been a huge impact for us as an organisation as well, which is important to mention. Obviously in the most obvious terms, being able to resource a project, so having staff, but also having access to the wide network of volunteers at WCIT has been very important. We've had their expertise, we've also had relationships that they've linked us up with, devices and technology that they've given to us that we've been able to pass on. And I think that really has meant that we've been able to professionalise our offer, we've been able to test what works, and actually we're an authority now on digital inclusion and digital skills, and it means we can go to other organisations and tell them what we think works and see if we can work with them. And you can see on the right all these relationships we've managed to build off the back of the investment that you've made in digital skills. And Rob is going to talk a bit more about what we're doing with these relationships in a bit. And finally, I think it's really helped to focus our attention on the importance of digital. It's kind of Pandora's box. We could never go back to not supporting people with digital. It's a core part of the offer of supporting people to exit homelessness. I'm going to hand over to Rob, and I'll be back in a second. But Rob, you can have a quick chat.
Yeah, hi, good evening everybody. My name's Rob Edgar. I'm Digital Inclusion Support Worker for Thames Reach. I'm quite new to Thames Reach as a paid member of staff, but I was a volunteer before, and I've come on board as part of the Tech Lending Hub with some of the organisations that you've seen earlier. Thames Reach has become like a library of devices where we can borrow some tech equipment to people that are in temporary accommodation for a limited period of time, but more importantly we supply connectivity with that. So we've got the accessibility through the devices, connectivity through the data, and then skills level below. So like that triangle is really important. And I think what we're actually seeing, like, it's a total new pilot. There's been 4 pilots launched across the UK, and we're one of them. But we started to notice really significant impacts in people's quality of life really quickly. We worked with some residents in a no recourse to public funds in Lambeth, and some of the significant changes happened really quickly within that organisation. Well, number one, the clients have got a telephone that they can, so there's a computer tablet that can make and receive calls, unlimited texts, and a limited amount of data each month, like 20 gigabytes of data, but connected to the Wi-Fi as well. So, but the staff members reported like a decrease in number of people coming into the office because people were having self-agency. They had the means to make the telephone calls and problem solve for themselves. Most of the clients are non-English speaking, and one resident said that he managed to get some DBS checks from Poland in 2 weeks that normally takes a staff member 8 months to secure. So like that time of that client would spend in temporary accommodation is massively reduced because we've given them the tools to be able to manage their own life. I think around so with the clients that we're supporting, it's a limited amount of time that we can give the devices to, so it's sustainable. We collect the device at the end of the 6 months, but then we also assess their needs. What have you been using that device for over the last 6 months? Because it's a tablet, it's quite big. It can make telephone calls, but it's not really practical. So if the client's been, doesn't have a device, hasn't been able to secure their own device at the end of that 6 months, we can give a smartphone to them, or occasionally we can give a laptop. But these devices that we can give to clients are quite finite, but the tech lending models are a bit more sustainable. Got some lovely pictures here, so got one, this guy come to our digital skills training, and through the digital skills training realised he had no mobile phone at all, so we were able to gift him a mobile phone with some data from the data bank. We got one of the residents of one of our accommodations, he was given a tech from the Tech Lending Hub, but after a few months he didn't want to use it. Actually what he really needed was just a device that he could use by himself. So we actually had to get him just like a really simple mobile phone that he could remain in contact with. We were oversupplying him with information. It's just about making sure that the level that we go at is relevant for the people that we're giving it to. This client is now in the position of moving out of temporary accommodation and is bidding for his own property. Now he's got his own laptop that he can bid for properties to move out of the accommodation. And this gentleman here, he's got a big smile on his face. He actually won a competition. We recommended a few clients to another organisation. He did so well. Recovery was a really number one thing. We collected some feedback data at the end of the 6 months, and the number one thing that came out was recovery through substance misuse. So this technology is actually helping people maintain their health conditions, which is just really significant. I think there's a few more slides that I'm ready for Alessia just to talk about.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Rob. And I think just a really good point to reinforce is the idea that giving someone advice isn't digital inclusion. You do need the data attached to it, you do need the skills attached to it, and you do need to make sure the device is the right device for the right person. So I just wanted to reinforce that point. There is still a lot of work for us to do as an organisation. So last month, Rob and I conducted a few focus groups with clients that was broadly representative of the people we support, and the findings were that there was still significant digital exclusion amongst Thames Reach clients. We have over here an executive summary. The report is due out this week, but we will share that with you, and if you would like to read the full report, we've got the contact information at the end so you can contact us. What the focus groups have told us is that 31% of people we support don't have access to an internet enabled device. Now that's 4 times the national average. 1 in 3 people that we support are on pay-as-you-go contracts, often paying a lot more for a lot less compared to the people we support who are on monthly contracts. 17% didn't access the internet at all, which is kind of unthinkable, but there was an issue around motivation. People couldn't see how or why the internet was essential in their lives, so obviously still some work for us to do. The 2 biggest barriers that we encountered were lack of digital skills and lack of confidence. So while we're doing all this amazing work around giving people devices, we still need to make sure that people have the skills to utilise those devices in a meaningful way. 4 in 10, almost 4 in 10, said they always relied on others to do digital tasks. Again, when we're talking about self-agency, this is obviously a huge barrier because of the digitalisation of key services like housing and healthcare. If people are relying on support, this is setting them back. And the areas that were most affected by digital exclusion were employment, money, and communication. I think 3 areas we can all agree are very important in our lives.
So may I ask you a little question?
Yeah, of course.
So there's 17% of people who have never either been on the internet or, I presume, don't want to go on the internet. What's the service that you are best able to use to convince them to go online? What's the most compelling service for them?
I think it's about meeting them where they're at, and in these cases, quite often the barrier for people was the fear. So we had people telling us about sophisticated phishing scams, websites that they'd heard of from other people. So it was just complete fear. Because Rob and I often come to supporting clients with lots of positive things around what technology can do, but until you can sort of push through that fear gap, and this is what I'm about to talk about, actually what model looks like for supporting people. So what we found was that people wanted one-to-one support, possibly then it could be graduated into small group support, but people needed to build that relationship with someone else, have some low-level digital skills, some modular digital skills around some key areas. Do you remember what they were, Rob?
Sort of security, communication, email, writing, text messaging, so like some basic sort of mobile device.
Yeah.
So like, sitting at a laptop might be too complicated, whereas some individuals have got access to a smartphone, and that's the starting point, is get them digitally connected for the device that they already have.
Yeah. So I think at the assessment stage, we'd identify what they want to do with technology, what barriers they have, and then it's about building that one-to-one relationship. But everybody's different, and that's why we're looking at more of a modular design. We don't want to do generic provision, because what people are telling us is that they feel left behind in group classes. So we want to work at their pace, one-to-one, before we progress them on.
Alessi, can I just... It's just that I think many of the people we work with have had really negative experiences of conventional education, and won't, if we go to them saying sit in a class, they'll have had bad experiences of being in class, and they won't go for that, certainly initially. So it's about sort of recognising that and working with people on their own terms, certainly initially, and then thinking where that takes them. Sorry, is that right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I would have said. Future model. No, we do agree. We do agree. I think retained trauma from classrooms cannot be understated. People drop out of education. To get them through the door is 50-60% of the battle. Once they're in, we can build the relationship, but getting them to that point is really challenging. And that's why Rob's doing a lot of outreach work in our hostels to kind of meet people where they are. Okay, so in terms of our future model, so I've let clients speak for us in terms of what they found useful, but on the skill development side, it's obviously holistic, practical support that has relevance to their everyday lives, that's at their pace, move with the speed of trust with those clients around, and we're thinking these key sort of modular areas that we've identified, and sort of a low-level digital skills capabilities before people feel comfortable to try other stuff. And then secondly, access to data and devices. So we've really expanded our work around that, and we've seen really positive progress in terms of quicker move-ons, people recovering from homelessness or exiting homelessness more quickly. So that's certainly an area for development. And I think I'd just like to finish on reminding everyone, although everyone I know is aware of this, the impact and the consequences for people and for society and for us as an organisation when digital exclusion isn't addressed. It holds people back in a multitude of ways, from accessing services, from moving into work, from getting themselves into a position where they're independent. And so that's kind of where our interventions are around. They're about increasing independence and stability with this model. That's our contact information. If anyone has any questions, and I will circulate, I think I've got 25 copies, which might just be enough, our executive summary. So you can have a read, and please come back to us if you have any questions. Over to you, Rosie. Do we have a question? Oh, sorry.
I can hear there's a combination of people wanting to be more participative with others, but also to be independent when they need to be. So with those two things in mind, do many of the individuals use the technology for language learning to increase their English language skills? So that seems like a core thing.
Yes, I mean, Google Translate is the number one thing that I start with when I'm doing an assessment. You know, I make sure that the client has that accessibility to use that feature as well, so that they can communicate with people in their daily lives.
Right.
I mean, with ESOL within Thames Reach is a different service.
I mean, I think literacy, so reading and writing, is also an issue.
Right.
It's wrapped up with this to some degree. So people who have difficulty, with digital literacy may also have literacy problems. I think it helps us identify that group, and we do have services that can help people with that. And again, what we're trying to do there, I think, is there are adult literacy services around. Again, the same issue about people walking to a classroom is an issue. So what we aim to do is, with the services we do provide in that area, is to provide a bridge between us and those more mainstream services. So yes, it is an issue, and I think this can help as well, but they're sort of separate but slightly overlapping issues.
I saw something the other day where someone was saying that they had been at the top and then they hit the bottom, they become homeless, and one of the things they forgot how to do was to communicate with other people. So suddenly that isolation was the overwhelming bad feeling that they had, and drove them to suicidal thoughts and everything. And when it came out of it was that they were helped to communicate with others in all sorts of different ways. So hence my question about language.
Yeah, I mean, I think we had one client quite recently. He was mute and just couldn't communicate at all, and we've already pre-installed some apps, like some accessibility apps, but I suppose our intention was like for people who were literate, so that they could paste some text into it and it would read it aloud. But what it did was allow this client the ability to communicate, just by typing in real time and it's speaking it out, and he's called me about 3 times every day. Number one, he couldn't believe that he didn't feel valuable enough to be able to receive a device, and he keeps contacting me like 3 times a week to say how thankful he is for receiving a device, because the only way that he could have to communicate with people was to slap and draw attention to people so that they would look for him, because he know by mouth.
Yeah, I mean, it's really just to say, thank you again for all your support, and obviously none of this development and delivery of the programme and the learnings we've developed from it around what we're going to do going forward would have been possible without the kind of initial investment we've had from WCIT and the members. And obviously the funding programme has come to an end, the funding with Thames Reach has come to an end, but there are other ways that you can get involved in the team to support Thames Reach and support this programme. So one of those is around volunteering. So we have various volunteer opportunities available on this programme, but on other programmes as well. So please do contact us if you're interested about that. There's also obviously ways you can continue to support us as donors and individual donors if that's something you're interested in. And again, you can talk to us about that. And I suppose also it's just a kind of an ask around, I mean, you can see my job title now, we'll talk about fundraising comms, a kind of ask around if there are other networks you have or other elements that you might think might fit into this programme around kind of devices and data and other things like that, then please do continue to speak to us and let us know, because we've got plans for taking the programme forward and we do kind of need other partnerships and help to do that. So, yeah.
Thank you, Rosie. So we sort of naturally segued into some questions there from the floor. So are there any other questions from anyone here for the team at Thames Reach before we move on a little bit? Now's your chance.
You can ask us anything about Thames Reach. It doesn't mean just
Yeah.
Just one question now. How do people find out about you? So the people that you help, how do they get to hear about you?
Well, we have the Employment Academy, which is a multi-agency employment hub in the community, so we get a sort of footfall from them, from the local community, but we also run services across all 32 London boroughs. So support staff are aware of the work that we're doing and they refer in that way. Yes, we're always sort of out banging the drum of digital inclusion and digital skills. So yeah, mostly internal.
We work people, lots of people, probably the second largest group of people we work with. So the largest group of people we work with are people that we see on the streets. So we see thousands of people on the streets every year. Generally, not all of those people, but many of those people spend a very short time on the streets. But the second largest group of people is people in their own accommodation, either who may be at risk of homelessness or who have been homeless and are moving away from homelessness. And they're a really big group that we might be working with. So it's part of that, how do we equip people with the resources to manage their lives and stay away from homelessness, and this is a key part of that. But also, I think one of the case studies in the previous slide is around work that we do in hostels. So it's about working with people who are in accommodation, who may be working on a number of different issues at once. And I think it's important that we see what we do here is not just what we do when people are sorted out, but it's a way of helping people sort themselves out. So people might have a number of support needs around substance misuse or mental health, but there's no reason why we shouldn't be working with them on their digital literacy as well at the same time.
How many of you are there?
How many staff?
Yes.
It's about 400 staff across the organisation, 200 volunteers.
How many people have, out of all the people you come across, how many have a digital neediness? We lots of different ways to count it, but we probably work with between 5,000 and 7,000 people a year. And I think, in terms of need, we're talking around a significant percentage of them, probably around 50%. Depending, at different levels of need, but I'd say probably at least 50%. So a good half don't have
maybe
enough skills.
The question about
Do you collaborate with many other charities that are perhaps offering similar services to slightly different populations?
Or we collaborate with some charities that operate very similar services to us. Most of our services are delivered under contract to local authority or the Greater London Authority. And it's fairly rare that we work, we do in some areas, but it's fairly rare that we work where we provide full sort of spectrum of services. So inevitably we will be seeing people on the streets and we will refer them to hostels and accommodation run by other organisations, and they will be referring people onto accommodation where we are providing the support, and we can be supporting those people throughout that journey in different ways with digital literacy or around employment and so on. So yeah, all the time.
And how about the substance abuse and
the
mental health issues and the legal problems?
Yeah, so substance misuse, we work really closely with substance misuse organisations, so the NHS, but also charities that work in that world. We deliver services, interestingly, as part of the NHS. So we're part of an alliance delivering mental health services in Lambeth. So we're really core to that. And that's very, we have a set of ethos and value statements, and one of the key ethos and value statements is about working in partnership. Because
I think we would always recognise that homelessness, rough sleeping, is a problem that we won't end. You know, we're not a small charity or a medium-sized charity. We won't do it on our own. We need to work with lots of other people, and it will require a significant push, and that will include government and other charities and lots of other people.
I think David, you know.
When I was listening, I was assuming that the devices that you receive are donated, but is that the case? Do you have to buy new devices? Or
This is a question for Robin, on this role, I think. Really.
So we've been donated 225 devices that we lend for 6 months at a time, depending on the condition of devices when they return. And then we're constantly looking for donations of devices that we can use as a device bank. Because some people can progress automatically, because they've been given free data, and some people are able to budget and buy themselves their own device. But normally by the end of that 6 months, people are probably just getting comfortable with technology, and it's more about finding a more appropriate device to suit that individual. So whether it's downgrading to a smartphone, or maybe somebody's gone to college and it's a laptop, or maybe like another tablet, smart tablet.
So presumably constantly trying to resource your
yes, I mean,
device bank.
Yes, exactly. I mean, we support people in temporary accommodation, but we'd like to be able to support people who are not in that temporary accommodation, so that it's got an opportunity to be a bit bigger.
So there's a group of people I personally am really worried about at the moment. So there are people in there that we're not supporting in accommodation. Well, we are supporting accommodation, but we're not managing that accommodation. So they're in their own flats, we're helping people. And in some ways, of the people we're working with, they're the people who are probably most at risk at the moment, because costs so much, there's no real protection that we can give people from those costs. So this is one way in which we can help people manage their money, but also help them with some of their costs by using technology, you know, getting digital in a more efficient way, I guess.
Philip, I think.
Yes, I was going to ask, are there any particular types of volunteer that you're looking for? Because I'm looking at programs which are primarily digital volunteers and cyber volunteers and people using volunteering as part of the corporate development of staff. But I've also been asked by one of those I'm working with, well, how about those who are doing hotel and catering courses, or they're studying other subjects? You know, are there any types of volunteer you've particularly, what do you look for in the kind of volunteers you want? What do you tell people to look for, kind of thing?
So we have one volunteer who's 19-year-old who's a coding expert, and what he's trying to do is help us to create a mechanism to capture the data for the funders of the digital hub, so that it's for less man hours for us. So when the person initially gets given the device, he's working on a sort of boot startup. When the device gets started up, that the person has to put credentials, a bit like a Wi-Fi. So when you go to the airport and you have to log into the Wi-Fi, so that one point of contact would collect all the information that we would need, so that it could streamline the process. So, I mean, that's what we've got at the moment. Who knows what could go.
I mean, just generally within Thames Reach, there are lots of volunteering opportunities.
Yeah.
So they are in the teams that Leslie and Rob work in, so around supporting people around employment, as well as digital skills, interview skills, coaching, all that sort of stuff. And we have services that are really heavily dependent on volunteers. So we have a service called the Rapid Response Team. There's, I don't know if people are aware of StreetLink. So you see someone sleeping on the streets and you get in touch with them. It's a digital platform. So we are the organisation across the vast majority of London that responds to those notifications. And we have a professional team that does that, but the support of volunteers can enable us to cover far more ground, and that's really key. Lots of other opportunities. So.
Anyway, I've got Rosie's email address written down, which I'll be following up on afterwards.
And I think also corporate volunteering, if you have teams, or we can organise that kind of thing, and we can have a discussion about that.
Yeah, we do different kinds of, I mean, I would say we're very happy to, I think, work with, if there's a group of people that have got specific skills, we're very happy to work with those people to see where that would fit most within Thames Reach and how we can make it work most effectively for both sides.
Yeah, just a quick question. So I mean, I work in public sector, or with public sector customers. And so it seems that part of this is actually a product of public sector digitalisation. And I often talk to public sector customers about digital exclusion by design. So they're kind of applying the 80-20 rule, the 70-30 rule, and basically saying, well, we'll put the whole service online, but then what they're doing is they're eliminating all other routes. And then with COVID plus cost of living crisis, that's now impacting building strategies. So outreach points are closing down. So if you've got a feedback loop, if you like, back into the local authorities, back into DWP and others, you mentioned universal credit, to say, this is actually, these are the problems that these services are causing that we're having to deal with.
It's really interesting because I'll give you a chance to run with that. It is really interesting because one of the things that we see, so we did a piece of work actually with Department of Levelling Up Housing Communities, it's a bit of government we deal with, sorry, it's a bit of a mouthful, around prevention, and really it's clear that the majority of people we see on the streets are the people who have kind of passed through the system without touching the sides, so that the people who won't go along to the local authority won't contact the help that is meant to be out there to help them, and digital literacy is part of that. It's also actually much more difficult to get in touch with your local authority now than it used to be, and particularly if fine if you're organised, you're planning to do it, but if you kind of think, I'm in a panic, I need someone to help me, and there's no one there, you think this isn't going to work and you go somewhere else, and they're the people often who end up on the streets. But I mean, there's more. There's lots to it. But I mean, that's a group that's really increased since the pandemic. So, a group of people who can't get help.
Yeah, so just
the help's notionally there.
If you partner with Lottie or organisations like that can then sort of advise the local authorities on how to develop services in a more inclusive way.
I mean, part of the device bank is sort of part of the Lottie strategy.
Yeah, cool.
Dan.
Just following up on Philip's question, do you have, I haven't looked, so the answer might be yes, of course we have this, kind of a day pack for organisations that do volunteering days? The reason I ask the question is, I worked at Credit Suisse, a lot of banks and other organisations do this where we do volunteer days, so a bunch of us go out, put our slacks on, and then go and do something. I cleared a field with cow parsley. I didn't know what cow parsley was, now I do. And that was kind of fun, but as a bunch of bankers, and you can interpret that in any way you like, standing in a field clearing cow parsley probably wasn't the best use of our skills, although it was quite useful to that particular organisation at that time. It'd be quite helpful to have here's what a bunch of people from an organisation could do for you in a day, and we could then respond to that. I now work for MasterCard, we have the same kind of principle, so you can take a day volunteering, get a bunch of people together and go do something useful. It'd be quite useful to know what could we do that isn't clearing cow parsley.
I mean, I think often, as maybe it's the answer you want to hear, often if it is just a day, there is not that much that can be offered by the organisation, which I think is why it often does come to kind of volunteer activities that aren't using people's skills to the best advantage, like something that could be done in a day. So we offer some kind of group, offer is something that we need, but we do kind of group volunteering, which is around a bit of painting or a bit of gardening, and that's useful to us, but it's not as useful to us as people's skills are. But the way I think that a lot of companies structure their volunteering days means that it can be quite difficult to use that in a way that's sustainable and long term, I suppose. But so the answer really is no, we don't have a kind of pack that says in a day, if you have these skills, you could do this. But we would want to work with if the company's interested in individuals interested in giving us the time they have in that way, we'd probably work with them on a bit more of a bespoke basis to say, well, actually, how much time do you have? What are the skills of the group? And is there something we have that matches?
So if you could change how corporations think about these things, what would you say to them?
I would say to look at having long-term partnerships whereby they have matched up the values of the company with the needs of the organisations very closely, and have offered them a set number of I don't know, it would be volunteer hours or volunteer days that kind of matched skills of what the company has in-house with what the organisation needs. I think often when programmes have been developed by companies, they're with really good intentions about giving volunteering days, but it often maybe hasn't been done in kind of co-production with the charities that could benefit the best way, and so it ends up not being the best use of people's time.
And I think it could depend on what everyone's trying to get out of it. If you're trying to get a team building day out of it, we can supply a team building day, but you need to recognise we're supplying team building day rather than your necessary, making
a big impact.
Yes.
So could I follow up on that? Because one of the examples that I was told was very good was a large consultancy, we'll leave them anonymous, agreed a 3-year deal with a charity whereby their cybersecurity team, who were all supposed to give so many days to charity, there would be a 3-year period when all of those would focus on this particular charity, doing things that the charity wanted, and on the side you got the team building and the other stuff. Is that the kind of relationship you would like to have?
I would say yes, on the whole that's a much more productive relationship for both the charity and the company, so it's long term, it's kind of strategically planned around both.
I think the caveat is we don't want, we're an organisation that employs 400 people, we're not that big, our digital side is important, but it probably wouldn't justify, that.
I should say that most of what they were doing was not digital.
No, well that's fine.
One of the advantages was to get the security people thinking things other than digital cyber security. That was one of the plus points that the company was looking for.
But you've heard from Robin and Leslie that actually key to what we're doing, and this isn't just what they're doing, it's what we do as an organisation, is actually building trust and building relationships with people. And realistically, that takes time, and it takes sticking with it. So that's...
Again, one of the other reasons why you want continuity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think what I'm saying is the long term is nearly always going to be more kind of productive and impactful than ad hoc.
Yeah.
And satisfying for the volunteer as well as
That's great, thank you. And please join me in thanking our friends and colleagues from Thames Reach. Of course, none of which would have happened with the strongest link with the WCIT, that gentleman over there in the middle of that painting, Sir Kenneth Alyssa, who was the driving force behind Thames Reach in the first place. So it all joins up eventually. Thank you for that. Dan, I've got an unpleasant image of you in your slacks clearing Cow Parsley now, which is going to take some time to clear. I have now looked up what it was, and it's not as unpleasant as I thought it was. But every day's a school day, and I now know what Cow Parsley is. So that's great. We've heard a lot this evening about volunteering and the importance of volunteering, and one of the things that's important to the charity, and one of the things that we like to say is a unique point about what we do. We don't always manage to do it, but we try our hardest to do. As a grant-making body, we find that the impact of our grants is often multiplied enormously if we can add 1 or 2 tame or relatively tame volunteers from the membership of the WCIT to ensure that the grants are used wisely and that we steward our grant recipients through that journey. To that end, you'll be hearing a little bit more about WCIT volunteering from the Master when we're outside there. But for now, thank you again for coming. Do please and buttonhole me if you want to. But for now, that concludes this part of the evening. There are refreshments outside, so please join me in a glass or two. I look forward to continuing the conversations. Thanks ever so much.
Company, and I'm delighted that you're all here because you're all donors to our charity, which is a really important thing to do, to give money to our charity to enable the good works that we do with that money is an incredibly important thing. But there's something else that we do. We, in fact, actually, sorry, before I do that, I mean, in this room, for example, you will actually see two plaques of where people have given money. This is where people have given money to read about this hall. And over there are lists of people who have given money to help create Hammersmith Academy alongside the Mercers. And, you know, the Mercers are wonderful people, but their members rely on their forebears who actually created a phenomenal fund in order to so therefore we're the people who put our hands in our pockets to do that. However, we also, as freemen and liverymen, we do something else. We give our time, we give our talent and our efforts to assisting the grants we give, but also more so in terms of mentoring young people, people from our armed forces affiliations, entrepreneurs and others. And that time is given freely, is given, as they say, pro bono. So we thought that it would be a really good thing to provide a roll of honour for those people who have not just given money, but have given time. And so this screen, which you'll see in a minute, contains the names of the people who worked either pro bono or provided career mentoring during the Deputy Master's year, Alistair Fulton's year last year. And the reason we thought we'd do it for last year is we wanted to baseline the amount of volunteering and mentoring that we're doing. Because this year, my theme has been leverage. Leverage means to try to actually get the efforts of lots and lots of people to do a little, which amounts to a lot. And I'm really, really grateful to the fact that we have had more people volunteering. We have had more people mentoring this year. So the names on this list, when I become Deputy Master in October, will, I'm hoping, be a little bit longer. So I've been helped in putting this together, by the way, by Freeman Stuart Mitchell. Stuart is an expert in so many things, including sourcing a 32-inch Kindle screen. This is the largest screen you can find on the planet, so it's a fantastic thing. And it allows us, by the way, to make changes. So if there's anybody, by the way, who did volunteer or mentor during Alistair's year who is not on this list, please tell us and we'll add you to the list. Okay, and it's that kind of flexibility I think is really important. We must recognise people who volunteered. It is such an important thing to do. I mean, we often say there's 4 pillars to our livery, which you all know, being charity, education, industry, and fellowship. And I believe there's probably a 5th, and the 5th one is community. And that community is actually how we interact with our community. Because, you know, we've got a responsibility as technologists, given the world now relies on us and works on us, to actually now go out and give of our time, our talent and efforts. So we need to do more. So on this chart, when you'll see it in a minute, hopefully over the years, we're going to be adding more and more people who have gifted time, talent and effort. So without further ado, I would like to ask Deputy Master Alistair Fulton to reveal the roll of honour.
Thank you, Master. I must admit this is the one and only occasion where I feel like a monarch. So here we go. Hopefully it doesn't come off the wall.
Thank you very much. The text is a little small, but that means you've got to look at it really closely. But hopefully this will be here for many years and will grow. And I think maybe we might even to make the text even smaller, Stuart, the more people we actually have.